I'm Rochelle Wilhite. I'm the designated broker of Best Choice Realty. Tonight, we're going to be talking about affordability and manufactured homes, which seems kind of like an odd topic tonight, but I just got done doing one and I thought it would be really important to train you on how you would do a manufactured home on leased land today in Washington state. Each state's going to have different ways of doing manufactured homes, and we don't have a lot of manufactured homes. Or you think we don't have a lot of manufactured homes, but we actually do, and they are very affordable, and it is an option for a lot of seniors and a lot of people who are looking to downsize, or even just in my case, to actually get their first property. They've never owned a home before. So I'm going to go over an actual case scenario and actually open up the contract so that we can walk through the important points and then give you some takeaways of what you would need to know if you were going to go ahead and write your own manufactured home. So there will be time for Q&A. So if you have some questions, if you could just put them in the chat so that Shannon can read them after we get done here tonight, that would be great. So to start off with, I had a client who I've been working with for, this will be the 3.5 years. I met them at a barbecue. It was actually a 4th of July barbecue. They came over to a friend's house and we were talking, and this friend liked to garden. And it was funny, we were sitting on her back patio and looking at her beautiful flowers and all of her raised beds that she had in her yard. And this client, her name is Jody. Jody said, Rochelle, this is so nice that you help people buy and sell houses. I can't believe you haven't sold me a house. She kind of joked around about not working with her. And I'm like, well, I thought you owned your house. She's like, no, actually, we live in a townhome. And we've never owned a home before. We've always rented. And she's retired. She's 60, I think 65, 66, something like that. And she's never owned a home before, ever. And neither had her husband. He is a retired vet. And she's like, if you could help me find, this is again 3.5 years ago, if you could help me find a home that we could purchase with his VA, we could buy. And so I proceeded 3.5 years ago to show them properties that were VA eligible. And for whatever reason, they had sticker shock, there were some health concerns, and for whatever reason, 3.5 years ago, they did not buy. Well, their rent was very low. They were only paying, I think, $1,000 in rent at the time for their townhome that they were renting in Milton, Washington. And so over the last 3 years, they have had a really good what I call a sweetheart deal with the landlord, where they never increased the rent. They never increased, because even though the taxes went up in Milton and the prices went up in Milton, they never increased the rent. So they were sitting on this, what they thought was a sweetheart deal. Until recently, they started getting in touch with me. This is about a year ago. They got in touch with me. This is during COVID. And we're like, we feel like something's up. We feel like the landlord is actually going to up their rent. And I'm like, well, why is that? What's happening? Well, the actual owner passed away, and now they're going to up the rent on us. And so we want to, get ready for that time when we actually have an increase in rent. We want to be able to buy. So we went it back out. Now, in just even 2 years, as you guys know, if you looked at anything under 250, that was their price amount. Under 250, you're not finding anything in King County. You might find something that needs a lot of work in Thurston or down in Lewis County. We've taken them all over to all the counties. We even drove out to the Kitsap Peninsula to try to find these guys a home that would go VA, that would be a starter home for them. And right now, it wasn't feasible. And when it really came down to it, we sat down and did a consultation with these two. We realized that the priorities had shifted even in 3 years. Their mom had become elderly. So her mom is still living. She's in her 90s. They have some care responsibilities where they have to go up to her house, and they need to be in King County. So now we've got a really tough situation. Where can you find a house under 250 that's got one level living, because he's having a hard time going up and down the stairs. Again, he's a retired vet. So going up and down the stairs like their townhome is not going to be workable for them. They had set aside some money, but they didn't have a ton of cash set aside, and they've been paying a very, very low amount of rent. So We found them a manufactured home in a 55 plus community. We had looked at other 55 plus communities across the county and specifically King County, and we just happened to find one that did not have multiple offers on it. So Shannon's going to open up and show you that in a minute here. So Shannon, if you can cue that up, that would be great. But I want you to kind of think out loud. I mean, you have two different manufactured homes, and I get these questions a lot. Is this a manufactured home in the residential category? Or is this manufactured home that I sold these to, is it in a leased lot community? And what we had to go to is a leased lot community because of the affordability. We were not able to find them something that was in good enough shape that where they could live and they habitate and then not have issues with his health. I mean, I showed them manufactured homes that were on their own lot that were practically teardowns out on the Kitsap Peninsula. Sure, it met the budget, but when it came down to how much money it would take to repair, to replace, to do a 203K loan, to actually kind of blow it out, it was out of their budget. And so we had to really get down to kind of the brass tacks of things and go, okay, let's look at what we have to deal with here. So there are two different contracts in Washington State. There is one for leased land, which is what we're going to show you on the screen here, what Shannon's got on the screen right now. And then if you are going with something, a manufactured home on not leased land, you would use a residential purchase and sale agreement, but you'd also need to use a 22 MH. And the reason for that is because we need to identify whether the title has been eliminated on that manufactured home to make it not personal property, but make sure it is on its own lot. It is considered residential. So that's the reason why you would use a 22 MH. Many people confuse it. And so we want to make sure that you have a good understanding of when you use which forms in Washington. So with the leased land, you would use a different addenda. It's not a 21, and it's definitely not a 28. It's not a condo. It is a manufactured home form 23. So what you have on the screen here is a sample. And yes, I had to hurry and put this together because you guys won't even want to know what happened, but they were in and then they were out really quickly, and there was multiple offers, or there was a threat of multiple offers. So you guys are seeing me with an actual contract here where I didn't spend the time like I should have to actually write the seller's name. So you can see Janice Campbell as the seller, and then we've got my clients there as the buyers. Now, manufactured home on leased land, a couple things to note here is the number 9, term 9, you actually don't have title. It is done with a law group in somebody that handles these manufactured homes. There are a few good law firms. Craft Law Group did a fantastic job of knowing how to work with the lender. We did get a loan on this property, and so they know how to work with those types of loans. So you do want a good closing agent. It could be Stewart Escrow, it could be Old Republic Escrow, it could be one of those escrow companies. But in this case, the listing agent felt very comfortable using Craft Law Group in Bonnie Lake, and my client was close by, and they liked that escrow company for handling the escrow. So again, very unique. When you're selling personal property, or in this case, a manufactured home on leased land, you use a different contract, and you would not have a title on it. You would only use an escrow company or a law group to close it out. So that's what goes on number 9, is where that goes. Number 10, we were trying to close it quick, July 8th. So you've got to have your finances in order. Many people, when they're buying on leased land, they actually have cash. A lot of these downsizers, have kept up with their residential. Maybe you've listed their home, say on the waterfront in Des Moines. We had one of those that happened. And then they ended up finding a manufactured home in a leased lot community in Maple Valley, which was beautiful. It's a fantastic community. This community in Auburn happens to be a very nice community. It's got a pool exterior. It's got hairstylists in there. They do activities all the time for the people. It's a huge community, and it's all gated. So it's really a nice setup. And they don't own the land, but they own the manufactured home, which happens to have a detached garage shop, which our clients just absolutely loved. That's what they were looking for, and we never could find it. So this was kind of a needle in a haystack to find a livable manufactured home in a gated community in a safe neighborhood in King County for under 250. As you can see, it was 164,500. So we got a good deal on it. Earnest money, with something like this, could I have gone with the lower earnest money? I could have, but again, that shows the seller you're serious. So we opted to go with over the 1%, just slightly above 1. And that was suitable for them. They had that money set aside. And that also showed the seller, who was elderly, that we were serious about moving forward with this purchase. On number 13 and number 14, these are very important points. Utilities, 22K, because it's not the HOA, or not the HOA, the community owns the utilities. I opted to, on accident, I checked the wrong box. So you guys are learning from what not to do on this contract. You do want to waive it if the utilities are covered with the park. So that would be something you would check the waive box on section 11. But if it's not, sometimes those parks are situated differently where utilities are paid separate from the park, then you would have to go ahead and click the requested. Going on to number 13, number 14, those are contingent on buyer's disapproval 5 days after mutual acceptance. That was only because I had contacted the listing agent to find out if she had pre-ordered that package, which she had. Most of the time, those park approvals, they take 10 days. So you probably want to make sure you increase that. That's a very, very tight timeline. The only reason I did 5 days was because I knew it was already on order. And then we had written in 5 days, which also matched our inspection timeline. I kept the inspection 5 days and then matched it with the park approval. So I figured if we can get park approval pretty quickly, that would be good. And if not, I have a way out using the inspection contingency with the 5 days there. So you can do an inspection on this. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, we highly encourage the buyers. We had an instance with a manufactured home. I can't remember whose it was. It really doesn't matter. It was up in SeaTac, and one of our brokers sold it to them and paid cash. And I hope that you don't do this, get into a rhythm. And this was not because our agent did a bad job. It was the client chose not to do an inspection. And they even chose, even though they were paying cash, they opted not to get fire insurance. They were on a leased lot, so they paid space rental. But what had happened is after they moved in, it was a very old manufactured home, and they paid cash for it, and they didn't have insurance, and the thing burned up literally 2 weeks after they had closed on it. So that was not a very fun conversation to have with that client at that time. We looked at the contract, we looked at what our agent had done, what they'd written, how they'd written the contract, and they actually waived the inspection. So unfortunately, there was nobody to blame, except they had to end up going and buying a new manufactured home that they could place and get approval to place on that lot. And then they had to demo that the firehouse, basically, the house that was burnt by fire. It was the entire kitchen and living room, and it was not able to be restored. So pretty sad story, but I share the scary stories so that you guys don't sell that or have those types of conversations. You can use that as kind of experience in your tool bag. So if somebody says, Rochelle, should I waive my inspection? As you can see from this contract, no, we actually had it inspected. We had it fully inspected because this was a first-time home buyer. This is their very first home. And as Shannon will attest to, they had a lot of questions about, how does the electrical work? How do I turn on my plumbing? Where does this shut off? What are the things I need to be concerned about with the garage? And what about the pests or rodents that can go in underneath? Where do we need to make sure that we're sealed correctly? Yes, there was caulking. Yes, there was a plumbing leak. We actually found, when we did the inspection, we found that there was plumbing leaks in all of the areas. They had replaced the plumbing. That was good to know, that they used some newer plumbing all throughout the manufactured home. That was a nice surprise to find. But there was some leaking. And so we'd asked the seller in our 35R negotiation to actually hire a licensed, bonded, insured plumber to go underneath the crawl space and actually tighten up those areas and provide proof that the work was completed. And Shannon, if you go to show that, that's very helpful. The 35R was created. Make it a little bigger if you could. That would be great. It says there we go. Seller to have a licensed, bonded, and insured plumber or contractor to identify and remediate the active plumbing leak in the crawl space which appear at the master bathroom waste plumbing kitchen area and west facing structure hose bib. Contractor and plumber shall also remediate the insulation, wood finishes, and crawl space vapor barrier. Seller will provide receipts 5 days prior to closing. So we actually got the receipts, and the seller was thrilled that they got full price for their property, but the buyer was also thrilled that we negotiated and had that fixed so that they didn't have to worry about it. They're not going to go underneath that, nor did they want to have that expense. They had plenty of expenses just to move in, get themselves a new refrigerator, and to paint the structure inside. So as you kind of scroll through, the contract is very similar in the way it's designed, like the residential. I kind of went over the different key points. Financing, if they are getting financing, not paying cash, you do want to use a 22A. In this case, there were repairs called out, so we had the opportunity to do a walkthrough and to make sure that the repairs were done properly. That's why, because I didn't know on timing, I went ahead and had them provide us with receipts that were sufficient. The inspection allowed us to do an inspection. Again, it's the same 35 inspection. If you were waiving the inspection, you would use a 35W. And then as far as utilities, you don't need a 22K. And as far as title, there is not a title to the property, but you do need to get a copy of the title policy. It's called a vehicle title policy. So that's something that we ask for in your checklist. And a lot of people are like, well, what's that? Why do I need that? And that's what is part of the things that we ask for on something on leased land. When they're getting financing, that would fast track the financing as well. So when there's only a couple companies that will offer financing on leased lots. 21st Mortgage is a national company that I've referred people to, but we actually found one out in Tacoma and they did a fantastic job. It was Sound Credit Union. They actually even saved our clients some money on the interest rate because they opened a credit union account. They opened a bank with them. So they were able to get a discount on their interest rate, and it was a better deal. So when we were comparing 21st Mortgage to Sound Credit Union, in this case, and again, this is recent in the last 30 days, in 2020 or 2022, that was the better deal for my client. Now, sure, the interest rate when you're getting a manufactured home on leased lot, be sure not to set the expectation that they're going to be at the 5.5% or whatever the interest rate is at this time for just a general mortgage for something on its own lot. Whenever you're talking about an older manufactured home on leased land, it's not everybody's going to loan on that, and that product becomes more expensive to do. So I can't quote you what they got. I actually don't even know, but the interest rate is more in the 8s or 9s, that kind of interest rate for something on their leased lot. So the intent is basically to, have a mortgage for it, pay it off soon, and not have it, and put as much as they can down so that it can offset the loan amount. But yes, you are going to be paying more on the interest rate with something like on its leased lot. And that was hard to explain to somebody who had never owned a home. And also when we were showing them veteran VA owned properties where they didn't have to pay any money down, and the interest rate was obviously a lot less than what we ended up landing on. But at the end of the day, we looked at the entire picture of what they were trying to accomplish, and this house completely meets their needs. And their loan amount is actually less than renting a 1-bedroom, I think, condo is what they were looking at. The alternative would be a 1-bedroom condo renting and paying the same amount as they would be paying to have their own place. Now, because it was a Sound Credit Union, it was a finance loan, it did require an appraisal. And the appraisal ended up coming in. The appraisal on the place actually came in, I think it was $10,000 or $15,000 more than what we landed on. So that was very exciting to give them that news, to give them that silver lining when they felt like, oh my gosh, my interest rate is so high. I was fortunate to give these people the news that they actually got the appraisal that was appraised more than what we actually purchased it for. So that was pretty exciting. Shannon, go ahead and go into the forms real quick for me. Let me make sure. The 22MH, I want to switch over on that. So let's talk about, now that I've talked about leased land, and maybe it sparked some conversation around that, I want to flip the script and then talk about something that is not on leased land. There are some fantastic deals that are manufactured homes but they own their own land. And a lot of those buyers are different types of buyers. It could be a retired couple like I had. We did look at some opportunities out there on the Kitsap Peninsula and also down in Longview. We looked at some opportunities down there for them to actually have a home. We can use the VA as long as the it's tied down. It's got a tag. It's a HUD tag, and it has a foundation certificate. So there are some provisions that allow for more financing options and less challenges by going with VA, but you have to, there are obviously other things to consider. So foundation certificate, HUD tags, things like that certainly have to qualify. The year built also becomes very important when you're looking at manufactured homes on not leased land, but they have their own land. Many people will look at these opportunities with just the opportunity of like, hey, I'll live there. The utilities are already on the property. They're already connected. They're already being used. There's sometimes a septic design or they're connected to sewer. Those are some great opportunities because what they tend to do with those types of opportunities, live in the manufactured home or have it be kind of like a pad, if you will, then they end up taking the manufactured home away and they end up usually building. And that sometimes is a good deal. Those opportunities exist out there. You just have to know how to structure them, work with the listing agent. Oftentimes they kind of know what will and will not finance. And if your client's not paying cash, you will have to get a lender that will lend on that type of property. But what the lender's going to be looking for is that you have included a 22MH, a manufactured home addendum that will describe what the manufactured home is, what the VIN number is, what the year built is, so that they can determine whether their loan product will actually be qualified. And some of these, you think you're going about it, and if you're working with a lender that has not done a manufactured home on real raw land, then you might want to find somebody that has the ability to do that, that has done these and had success. Because if you just take any lender, oftentimes they don't know what to ask or how to package it so that it goes through the underwriter and they're not asking for these types of things later. Also, many agents write purchase and sale agreements up that don't include a 22MH. And then they have to basically go with labor and industries, and they go through a lot longer process because they have not set the groundwork correctly with the contract. So you do want to use a 22MH because it does have term 3 in there, where its buyer has been advised that manufactured homes, including homes that are title eliminated, are subject to the regulation of Washington State Department of Labor and Industries. And they have regulations that require to make sure that things are tied down properly to the actual land. And then it has a period of time where they can do that L&I. And then there's a 15 days where the seller, if L&I calls something out, the seller will then have 15 days to remediate the deficiencies, or the agreement will terminate and the earnest money will go back to the buyer. So it's a protection for the buyer, but it also flags the listing agent and the seller that we are serious about the manufactured home addendum, and we are wanting this agreement to be part of the agreement as far as the title being eliminated or proof that the title has been eliminated. That's what we're looking for on number 2. The tag sometimes is hard to find on those older ones. So that's the part where you start looking at anything probably, less than 1980 becomes very challenging. In fact, almost near to impossible to finance. You might be able to get something from Sound Credit Union or 21st Mortgage or others like that, but you're looking at a higher interest rate. And again, that might not be feasible. It might be smarter to take the manufactured home and then just work with the utilities that are on the property and build your own home on that land. I think that's it on the 22MH. Shannon, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, so I think it'll be good to summarize. So in terms of financing options for a manufactured home on leased land, what are your options for lending?
Okay. So summarize leased land, you don't have many, you have 2, maybe 3. And that's 21st Mortgage, and then you got Sound Credit Union. Sound Credit Union, if I were to compare the both, 21st Mortgage is a national, so you're dealing with sometimes East Coast time zone, and it's hard to reach some people. Sound Credit Union, there's a guy named Juan, and then I ran into another gal who is actually, I loved her even more than Juan. So there is an actual live person you can talk to ask questions. From start to finish, it's the fastest manufactured home on leased lot that I've done. But that's because my client had all of their ducks in a row. They'd already prepared all of their financials. Everything was collected. And we had the copy of the vehicle title. You do need a copy of that from the listing agent. And that's what the manufactured home lender, 21st Mortgage or Sound, would require you to have that in order for them to underwrite with all of the financial information they collected from the borrower. So all of that information from start to finish, we actually close in less than 30 days, and that's really unheard of. And that's only because we were working with somebody local, and because my client was obviously very, very motivated to get into their property, because they had notice on their door that they would actually be selling the place and they need a house to live. So it was extremely important that we met those deadlines of July 7th.
And we had another question that was asking what the difference was between title eliminated and no title eliminated when it comes to one on its own property. So can you explain that real quickly?
Again, I can't because I'm not a title expert, but that would be a good question for your title company. Okay. It clearly says in number 2, title elimination, certificate of ownership. It's when the manufactured home becomes eliminated, so it's no longer personal property and becomes fixed to land. Some of the properties have been eliminated. Your title company, if you actually were to pull, say something that's on its own land, you'll see that the title has been eliminated or not. You call your title company and they'll tell you, oh yeah, that's been eliminated, or it's not. So you probably, if something's not looking right, like the legal description doesn't seem correct, that's where you probably want to do the 22MH and check the box for title elimination, because it may not have been done. That's where you want to work closely with your title company. If the seller fails to eliminate it from the agreement, the earnest money is refunded to the buyer. So if they're not able to come clean with that, that's your way or your exit out of moving forward with the purchase and sale. So and you have 5 days after, before closing. So you actually have all the way through. It's just unfortunate it gets to that point when this listing agent doesn't really know what they're dealing with. So the more conversations you can have with the seller and see, did you open up title? And they're like, oh, I didn't know I needed to because it's personal property and it's land or whatever. There's some red flags. You probably want to, do some research on your own and talk with your title company and have them look up the tax parcel number, have them run it, and see what has been eliminated, what has not. And then that will give you a clue on whether you need to check the first box or the second box. No title elimination is what most listing agents are going to shoot for this. That the manufactured home, especially the one that's going to be junked, just kind of demoed, they're most likely not going to want a title eliminated. They're just going to be no title elimination. And they're just going to have you check that second box. So again, you're going to need to know kind of the players, the lender, the title company, and make sure that if it is being eliminated, that you have a good title company that's going to help you with that. And number 2.
Okay. And then
question for title mostly.
Yeah. So the last one, I think it would be good for you to touch on, Rochelle, is the return on your investment for a manufactured home. I think a lot of agents are worried about that, and their worry kind of rubs off on their clients too. So what would you say to your clients if they're worried about the return on their investment on it not even having its own land?
Yeah, location is the first thing I would say. So in this example, I exhausted all of the resources trying to find them a stick-built home because they also had that same notion. In fact, they made the comment, Shannon, that please don't share anything at their housewarming party with her mom, who's 90-some years old, because she also comes with that preconceived notion. Like, oh my gosh, why would anybody buy a manufactured home that's on leased land, that they don't own the land? But what her mom doesn't realize is that the pricing, the values of things, especially in this type of community where it's set up that way, that the land price has just gone up astronomically, and just to get a home and to actually rent, this is what they could afford in King counties proper. This is an Auburn and not very, very nice community. So as far as the value, I would say you want to look at location. Is this location, if you're buying on a leased lot, is the community properly managed? Make sure you're reviewing that park rules. Make sure that your client has read the documents where the park rules. Is it properly managed? Are people keeping up with their lots? Is there community features that are suitable? This happens to be a 55 plus community. I mean, my clients love this type of thing, right? Where they have amenities and they have resources and they have medical and they've got a hairstylist. My gosh, they don't even have to go outside the community to go get their hair cut. I mean, those types of things add to the valuation. That's a valuation of, the structure, and it's certainly if the property is well kept inside, and I think this one was built in 87, Jan, I think it was 87, or it was less than 1990, but they'd replaced the plumbing, they kept it up inside. The garage was amazing. They'd updated the electrical, they'd updated the plumbing. So it did not appear as old, and that structure, when we got that appraisal, they're thrilled. So again, it's defying the odds of this preconceived notion like, oh, things don't appreciate, when in fact I proved otherwise with just the way that this one penciled out. $164,000, and then you kind of layer that with the monthly rent. I think it was like $780 for the space rental. That still was well below what they would pay in rent. So when everything is said and done, even if they were to pay zero down, it was still less for them to buy this manufactured home in the 55 plus community than it was for them to go and rent. And that just was a home run. I mean, that just gives me so much joy knowing that somebody is a homeowner. And then she calls me and just like, I can't believe I've got that much equity in it. I mean, my mom would be so thrilled, but I'm not going to tell her it's on leased land. So you will have to deal with a little bit of that, of this preconceived notion of, oh my gosh, you're buying something that's not going to appreciate. When in fact, we've sold many condos that appreciated nicely. We've sold many land that's appreciated nicely. But just because the land is in a lease situation, as long as the structure and the location is ideal, I don't think you can go wrong, especially if it meets all your clients' needs. And in this case, it did.
Yeah. And I think the key points, so that we're talking about leased land specifically, but for ones where it is a manufactured home and it owns the land that it's on, the lending can be done from outside vendors, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
And is there anything that those lenders would require? And I think that the one thing that you had mentioned, and I've seen this before too, are the HUD tags.
Yes.
And those, they're on the property, guys.
They'll require a foundation certificate. So not your typical inspector typically does not do that. I know Sterling does. It's an add-on to their inspection. There are a few, and there's not as many as you would think that can actually do a foundation certificate that's required by many lenders in this category. If they're paying cash, no big deal. But if they are getting financing for something that's on its own land, the financing is going to require a manufactured home be tied down or have a foundation certificate. You'll want to talk with the lender specifically about what requirements are necessary for them to underwrite the file. And it's going to vary. Depends on the product, depends on the lender, it depends on what the appraiser is going to call out. It also will depend. I found where I had some problems where they've made some adjustments to the manufactured home, like they've added something onto it. That's not going to be a good thing. That usually does not qualify. And that's not something that L&I will usually pass. And sometimes we'll get ourselves into some problems where we'll actually have to have the seller remove that awning or attached room. I've seen some pretty creative stuff out there, especially in the peninsula and Pierce County out there in Eatonville and Graham, where I've seen some creative things and it didn't pass financing. And so it takes longer, and it's going to take some work on all the parties to make sure that we can get that to pass. So kind of watch out for those things. If you're when in doubt, reach out. That should be my tagline for the day. When in doubt, reach out and ask people that have done manufactured homes. I've done quite a few in my career. And certainly lenders, you want to stick with lenders that have done manufactured homes. Don't try to get creative and go, oh, I want to use this out-of-state lender or this person that's hasn't done any manufactured homes in a very long while. You're going to have a harder time in getting that through underwriting. They might say they can do it. They might quote you a great interest rate. And then all of a sudden you're being asked for a laundry list of things that would not be asked where somebody had already asked for those things at the beginning or the onset. So kind of work through that questionnaire. If you have questions about that, let us know. The HUD tag is often asked. Usually that can be found somewhere on the manufactured home or the serial number. Sometimes it's in the interior next to the electrical panel. I've seen them inside kitchen cabinets. So I've seen all kinds of things out there, but just be careful, make sure that there is some sort of foundation certificate. If you're taking a listing, ask the seller if they ever had it inspected and if there was a foundation certificate that they were provided. And also ask them if there was tie downs, if they'd actually had a foundation guy go in there and actually physically tie down. It's literally like some ties that kind of affix the manufactured home to the land. And that is something that's required for lenders to actually approve. Now, some of them I know have slipped through, but at the end of the day, do you want hiccups with your deal, or you want to have your client frustrated with you? I certainly don't. So ask a lot of questions with the seller and the listing agent when you're kind of in the process of negotiating those details. Yep. Kathy, I'm speaking truth. I think you've done a few of those in your career.
Yep. And I think you got all the other questions answered. So I think we're good to go.
Kathy had a great thing. It says, when it says mobile and manufactured, what's the difference? It's a car. Yeah, mobile would be kind of car, manufactured would be built on lots. So sometimes we use terminology interchangeable. Lenders mix that up all the time. They think it's mobile versus manufactured home. Make sure you tell them if it's going to be on its own lot, that it's a manufactured home. Use that terminology. If you say mobile home, I think people automatically, especially lenders, automatically assume it's like an actual RV on a property. So make sure you're using the proper terminology. And it is a depreciating asset, yes. So the title elimination, yeah, as manufactured, that depreciation stops. That's a better way to explain it, Kathy. Thank you. Good call there. I think that's it. If you need help, there's support at bestchoicerealtywa.com. Upload your documents within 48 hours. And if you have questions, you can certainly, there is a checklist you can do if it's manufactured home. We have a checklist for that. You can go and download that on our manufactured home checklist on our website. So if you need that, just let us know. We'll direct you to the location on the website for that. Have a great week, you guys.